Welcome back, everybody. It's College Football Winning Edge, and it's a new year, 2021, so we have a new tutorial video for you to just take a look at what Nick does when he puts together all of these great sheets. He has actually reached the max of cells on these sheets before, which we didn't know. Xavier and I had to look it up. It's 5 million cells. He has actually got, it's like winning a video game, Nick, where you get to the final screen and it says, you have defeated whoever, blah, 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 blah. Congratulations. And you actually got to the final boss of Google Sheets. You've done it.
Yeah, I've done it. That's why, in part, the sheets look a little different this year. When we first started in 2018, there was only one big, massive Google Doc, Google Sheets. And then I eventually started doing different sheets for things like returning production, for things like statistical projections and all that sort of stuff. And I got to the point where I realized it really would be better if everything was back in one massive sheet. So tried to cram as much as possible. And yeah, early on in the transfer process from 2020 to 2021, this year, I did get that little pop-up that says you've reached the maximum amount of cells available. So hopefully I've rearranged some things, given us a little more room to be able to get everything that we can on the sheets this year. And then knowing, hey, this is it. We're not gonna try to cram anymore on in the future. But we've made some updates. We've added some things that I think will hopefully provide value to our Patreon supporters, including basically we've doubled the amount of player information that's available in the depth chart portion of our team profile. So I think that will be very helpful. We're including additional returning production numbers for offensive linemen, which is a little more difficult to find elsewhere. And then our coaching and statistical history, we're adding that to the very bottom of the team profiles, which we'll get to a little later. But that's where our coach ratings and things like that come from. They help us with our projected scoring margin model, our stats only model that we use to project individual games, one of our 3 that we refer to. So yeah, try to get everything in best we can. Tried not to make it all jumbled together. Tried to make it at least presented decently well. But yeah, so that's why we do these videos as well, because we pack so much in to these team pages that it might be a little overwhelming at first, especially if it's your first time joining us. So hopefully we'll answer some frequently asked questions that you might have if this is your first time with us. If you're thinking of becoming a Patreon supporter, want to drive through a lot of the things that you would get, hopefully that would benefit you if you do join us as a tier 2 Patreon supporter. And then just if you see tweets, things we refer to online, if you're not joining us on Patreon, this will give you a little bit more of an idea of the things that we are referencing, a little clearer picture maybe if we didn't attach a screenshot or something like that, or if we throw out a term like team strength or roster strength or team performance, things like that.
All right, so let's start with the first page first, and this is the team capsules page, which is the very first thing you will see when you open the player profile sheet or team profile sheet, excuse me. And we're just going to start with Alabama. They're the champs. They get the run here. So where do we want to start here, Nick?
Well, yeah, this is the page that comes up first and foremost. And this, what I call a team capsule, is basically the most important team information for all 130 teams. And they all are listed here. We have them listed by conference and then alphabetically within the conference. And Alabama being first is, and you can see there that they are our current preseason projected #1 team. That those 3 big numbers on the far left side are our overall power ranking numbers. So Alabama's number 1 overall, number 1 in the SEC, and then that team strength rating is actually where that ranking comes from. That's on a scale basically of 70 to 100. A 100 would be a perfect team, but when all our numbers are combined, and we have a formula that we go through to develop that final official overall rating, that's what we're referring to. It's our team strength rating. It's a little bit complicated, but it basically boils down to roughly 50% of a team's team strength power rating comes from roster strength. Roughly 20% comes from their coaching ratings, and then roughly 30% comes from past team performance ratings. So there's a little bit of overlap there because our coaching ratings are actually developed using our team performance ratings, and those are developed using a lot of those important stats that are referenced here as well, advanced analytics, and we do often are taking those from other folks, very smart folks who are doing a lot of great work. A lot of what we do, other than combining for team strength, team performance, roster strength, we're not creating stats or anything like that. We're compiling information a lot of times from other sources, or trying to put it all in one place. A lot of really smart people doing great work out there. And we've been able to take some of the things that they have done and kind of change them a little bit to fit our needs. We try to put everything on that 70 to 100 scale, just because that's easy for us percentage wise. We're able to take a lot of numbers, that might mean different things in different contexts, try to put it all on one scale, and then we can kind of play with our own weights and measures and things like that to develop our overall power rankings that we'll then use to project full season and game by game as well. But yeah, that first number is most important on the far left. When we ever say they're our number 1 team, they're our number 59 team, as you see Arkansas there, they rank 130th overall, whatever it is, that's what we're talking about, that team strength power ranking. So like I said, about 50% of that is roster strength. Our roster strength numbers are developed, and we'll see on the Alabama team page in just a little bit, but we've got individual player ratings similar to what you would see on a Madden NFL video game, the old NCAA video game. We actually call it VGR Plus, and that's for video game rating. So you just think about, what's this player's overall rating? We fleshed out over, I think, 11,000 of those across all 130 teams based on a player's projected talent potential coming out of high school from 247 Sports. We've weighted those, adjusted those based on their experience and their career production to help some underrated players, become a higher rated. If they're, coming in with a 75 rating, for instance, coming out of high school from 247 Sports, but they go on to become a, all conference 4,000 yard passer, things like that. We tried to develop a system that would enable that type of player to, become one of the higher rated individual players in the game. So if they get, or not the game, in our projection. So if they can get into the mid 80s, upper 80s, 90s, things like that over the course of a career. But we tally all those up for all players, all positions. We include some recruiting ratings as well, and that gives us an overall roster strength number that makes up about 50% of that team's overall rating. Team performance, like I said, is based on those important stats, things like yards per play, points per drive, yards per pass attempt, success rate, and expected points added. Those, like I've mentioned, come from some really great college football thinkers, and mention them here. Brian Fremeau at bcftoys.com does yards per play and points per drive, both of which filter out garbage time and only use numbers against FBS opponents. Parker Fleming, who stats a war on Twitter, also has recently developed a great website, cfbgraphs.com. His numbers are what we refer to when we're looking at EPA and success rate. And then so far, I haven't found, and those are also filtered garbage time and FBS opponents only. I haven't found yet a garbage time filtered yards per pass attempts, but some research that I've seen in the past at the NFL level mentioned that yards per pass attempt has historically been among the best, most highly correlated numbers to overall success at the NFL level. So did want to incorporate that as well here, but that is just a raw number from cfbstats.com, which is also a great provider of free statistics for all 130 teams. We do have a spot in here for returning production. The numbers currently listed in this video are in reference to Bill Connolly at ESPN, his very first returning production numbers from the 2021 season. I know he's done some updating, and then we're recording this on May 7th. We've just finished our first run through of our in-depth returning production numbers for all 130 teams. So we will have our own numbers that will replace Bill's numbers that are listed here. That should be coming later this month, but we have a couple of other levels to do with that. But if we can move just real quickly to the next page, and then we'll go in a little deeper on what these individual numbers mean when we get to the team page. But we've got a position quick reference page. And this is where we've combined the individual position and unit ratings for all 130 teams on one page. So this will go into greater detail on where these numbers come from when we get on the team page. But if you're just looking real quick and want to compare one team to another, or how all 130 teams stack up at a particular position, this is a great spot to get all of that in one page. A couple of new pages to follow that we've added. In 2020, we did have an injury updated page where we do have injury information on all 130 team pages, and we would put all individual blocks of those teams on one page during the season. However, one of our patrons suggested a chronological list. And so we have gone through chronologically to where, we do have information on all 130 pages, but you might not know there's a new entry unless you're looking at a specific team. And instead of having to go through all 130, a patron said, hey, how about just the most recent entries on one page? And so we've done that. It's a great idea. Our patrons are of course very smart, and we do appreciate their support, and they've got great suggestions for us. So we're always open to that, and think already, even though we've just started updating this in early April, it's been a very helpful place as well.
And if you want to look at teams, you can always Control F, on this. I mean, you can go to the team pages too, but if you're just on here and you wanted to look at, maybe it was a certain position, maybe if you just wanted to look at quarterbacks, you can filter by that. I mean, you can do this on any page. Of course, this is one of the easiest features of Google Sheets, but if you just wanted to look for quarterback entries, you can just Control F and go through that way.
Great point. The next page looks very similar, but it's for transfers, and same type idea where we include, basically we update our team sheets. I always say daily, but it's basically hourly. Anytime there's a report of a transfer, anytime there's a report of an injury, if I see it on Twitter, send myself an email. I might, maybe 5 or 10 of them pile up before I can actually carve out a little bit of time to go in and make the changes in the sheets. But we do that for all 130 teams as quickly as we can. But similarly, if there's transfer news that impacts, a particular team. If you've got 130 pages to sift through, you might miss one here or there. So we've created this page, also set chronologically, to fill that need, where you might miss 2 or 3 different bits of this offensive lineman, this defensive lineman, all happen in the period of a few hours. You're away from the office, or you're not like me and on Twitter all day, every day. So maybe you only catch it, at the end of a day or something like that. So we did have a page where we include most transfers. And what's on this page, I didn't want it to be completely overwhelming. So if, for instance, group of 5 sophomore who has not played in a game yet says that he's entering the transfer portal, that's not going to show up on this page. This is intended to capture players who are contributors, potentially starters at their current team looking to move on, or if they were a Power 5 transfer who didn't get a whole lot of playing time but has announced that they're moving to another FBS program where they might have an impact. We try to include that here as well. So this isn't 100% every transfer all the time, but this is going to be, for the most part, who we expect will be significant transfers. So next, the Alabama page, and there are 130 different of these. We are, of course, always making updates, and we are still in the process. It is May. It's still, fairly early in the off season. We do have some rough edges to smooth around other pages. We do have some updates we want to make, some additions we want to make. But this Alabama page is a good example of what the final product will be for all 130 teams once all is said and done. And that should be sometime in June. We'll have the coaching information and stats for coaching history updated for all 130 teams sometime in June. So everything should be fully 100% by that point. But first, we'll take a look at that team capsule. This is all the same information that was on that very first page, and all of this information is actually either sent to or from a information page that's at the very, very back after the 130th team, called the 2020 FBS ratings and rankings page. You can see how all of this information lines up for all 130 teams on that page, but it works so that they're connected to where anytime a piece of information is updated, whether it's a player injury, a transfer, a player adds a couple of production points after having a big game, something like that. All of this information updates automatically. So the pages work with one another. They work with that position quick reference page. They work with the team capsules page on the front, and then that FBS ratings and rankings page at the very back of the sheets. But we've talked about our power rankings. We talked about the team strength rankings and ratings. Next is roster strength. And like I mentioned, that has to do with individual player ratings. You can see here our quarterback ratings for Alabama, running back ratings for Alabama. Those are on that similar scale to where the maximum rating is a 100. The way we develop those individual player ratings, the 247 rating coming out of high school also works on that similar scale. An unrated player basically is a 70, and a maximum rating is a 1.00. I think Trevor Lawrence was a 1 or 9999 when he came out of high school. So the way I thought of this originally kind of, again, goes back to that NCAA video game, which made a fair amount of sense. They did a lot of good things, where a true freshman, your hotshot number 1 recruit, the highest player rating a true freshman ever came in with, in my experience, was an 85. So I thought, okay, if a perfect high school recruit is an 85 the first day he steps on campus, then we should adjust these talent potential ratings to be an 85% for a true freshman. And initially my thought was, okay, a senior is going to have 100%. He's going to be fully reach that full potential at 100%. And we did that the first couple of years, but I realized eventually there are plenty of high rated 5-star guys, even high 4-star guys who don't live up to that potential, so shouldn't actually max it out at 100 if they haven't proven it yet. So through trial and error, found that 93% for a senior seemed about right. There's certainly a lot of art that goes in with the science of this. So we've sort of scaled it, spread it out to where a freshman gets an 85% experience weight when they're a true freshman, goes up to 87.5 as a redshirt freshman, 89% as a sophomore, 91% as a junior, 93% as a senior. In 2021, it's a little bit different. We now have super seniors, and I made the choice, and I'm not sure, we'll just have to see how it plays out, but we have not added an additional weight for super seniors. We didn't bump it up to 94 or 95%. So we're treating super seniors like we would normal seniors. We'll see. I don't know if that's
big percentage then didn't even play anyway. So,
Well, and so that kind of my thought is, most of our super talented guys are going to leave for the NFL. So
right.
We would expect the guys who chose to stay, experience certainly matters, but maybe they shouldn't, I don't know, just decided they shouldn't get that extra boost of experience as being a super senior. And we'll see, it might be something we have to deal with in the future as well. We always are trying to learn as much as we can, make adjustments, learn as much as we can.
You mean you don't know what to do after the pandemic year, the year after? Man,
I don't know much of anything. That's sort of the key here is I am blessed to have a lot of time on my hands to build these sort of things, but I rely on a lot of other folks to tell me what to do with it. And
know enough to know that you don't know. I think that's where
I try my best to do that. So, so roster strength are those individual ratings, and we do break them out by position because a quarterback, of course, is the most important. We weight the quarterback position highest. Like I mentioned, other smart people have proven that, Bill Connolly specifically in this case, that receivers are a little bit more tied to performance on the field, the strength of those receivers, and especially in returning production, to how well a team plays on the field. The same goes for the secondary on defense. So receivers in our ratings get a little bit more of a boost. That position is a little bit more important. The secondary also gets a boost, a little bit more important. So quarterbacks matter the most, receivers and defensive backs matter the second most. Then every other position group is the same for us in our weighting. However, because the offensive lines and defensive lines are the toughest for recruiting sites, again, people who do a great job there's a little bit trickier. It's a little trickier to scout and project offensive and defensive linemen at the high school level. So we've come up with some other things to do to try to, again, give underrated players a little bit of a boost. And then in rare instances, overrated players, bring them down a little bit. We try to do that on our offensive and defensive lines with what we call our O-line performance rating, our D-line performance rating, which are very similar to the next thing on our list, team performance. Team performance is only stats. We look at those advanced stats that I mentioned, the important stats, as well as a lot of other things. PFF grades are taken into account for all of their different categories. A bunch of other stats, explosion type stats, things like touchdown rate, things like, the percentage of plays that are 30 yards or more. I've culled through a lot of different stats and taken some out that don't seem to be very predictive, tried to focus more on others that are, and again, put it on that scale of 100 for the very best, in the high 60s for the very worst. Taken all that information I could as far back as I could. A lot of it goes back to 2005, and we've developed a team performance rating for every team and every year from 2005 to now 2020. And we've also been able to set aside offensive team performance, defensive team performance, and special teams team performance for those same type ratings, again, back through 2005. The head coach rating is based on those team performance ratings. So as I mentioned, that 20% of our overall power ranking and rating is for coaching, and 30% is team performance. Well, that they kind of blend a little bit because, you know, coaches, of course, move around. And so we do a weighted historical team performance for head coaches. And that's where that coach rating comes from. So those are not opinion based at all. Those are all still drawn from those stats historically. And if you scroll back to the far left there, those coaching ratings are based on team performance, and we do weight those to where the most recent season matters the most. Last season, a little bit less, the previous season, a little bit less, and so on. And we do a similar system for offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, where we rate those coaches based on their team performance as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator, as a defensive coordinator. Head coaches, once they become a head coach, we kind of wipe the slate clean. We don't really, you know, if they were a hotshot coordinator, they come in with a, 95 offensive coordinator ranking, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a 95 head coach. We do an average head coach rating for Power 5 head coaches. We do an average head coach rating for Group of 5 head coaches when they are a first-time head coach, because you never really know what to expect. We think we know who a good hire is, even if they're a first-time head coach. But in that first year, a lot of times things can get a little bumpy. Sometimes, a home run hire doesn't necessarily work out, at least right away. So we just go with an average rating there. But because coaches change, of course, sometimes a great head coach can raise a program. Sometimes poor coaching can pull a program down. So that's why we separate team performance for the program itself from the head coaching team performance. I think there's a blend there that gives us a little bit more accurate overall rating, overall projection by trying to single out some coaches that do really good things, who might move on to a bigger and better job than just the team history itself. All right. So next, one last thing on team performance. We do, because again, some other very smart people have shown that it helps your overall projections if you do a window of past performance instead of just last season. So when we're making our 2021 projections for Alabama, you can see they're number one in our power rankings. And if we built that solely off of what happened in 2020, they'd be a runaway number one, because Alabama in 2020 was one of the best teams all time. They, I believe, are our highest team performance rating of all time, if not they're number two. But obviously they're losing some production and things like that, so we have to take that into account. But Alabama has a very strong track record of success. They ranked number one in team performance in 2018, number one in 2017, number one in 2016, number one in 2015. So that all matters when we're looking at projections. There are some other teams like LSU, of course, national champion in 2019, but they took a big step back in 2020. They also were playing at a top 10 level prior to that, prior to jumping up and becoming a national champion. So we kind of have to find a little bit of middle ground. We kind of have to hedge our numbers a little bit, or we feel, or we've learned that gives us a better projection if we incorporate multiple years. So Alabama, most people might expect they take a little bit of a step back based on the players that they lost. However, they've been so good for so long that when we look at the wider window, they're still playing at a number one level, or we expect they will play pretty close to that. So we do a 5-year weighted team performance rating, and we do a 3-year weighted team performance rating. And both of those go into our preseason projections. We will fade those out over the course of a season if it looks like Alabama's really taking a step back like LSU did last year. We don't expect that at this point, but hey, it happened in 2020. So we do fade those out once we get 3, 4, 5 weeks of new team performance data in the 2021 season. That number, that 5-year weighted, 3-year weighted, those go out, and then it'll only be 2021 team performance rankings, if that makes sense. But in the preseason, history has shown us that it's important to have a little bit of a wider window. So I've had some patrons reach out to me so far because Coastal Carolina is outside of our top 30. Well, they were 11-1 last year. They finished in our top 25. They were in the AP poll up in, close to the top 10, and had somebody say, hey, why is Coastal Carolina not a top 25 team? And more importantly, why is Appalachian State ranked ahead of them in your Sun Belt rankings and in your overall rankings? Well, part of that is Appalachian State has a 3-year weighted average team performance in the top 10. So we trust Appalachian State a little bit more than we trust Coastal Carolina, who was a, team that posted numbers in the 100s in team performance before last year, then jumped up, had such a huge season. We need to see a little bit more evidence over a longer period of time. And it absolutely could be true that we are underrating a team like Coastal Carolina. We underrated a team like Liberty in 2020. We've had, teams, academy, the service academies, Army, Navy, Air Force. We have, sometimes we can overrate them, sometimes we can underrate them. A team like Wyoming that doesn't recruit at a high level, but gets, they kind of over plays their talent profile. There are some teams that we've picked up over time that we can struggle with a little bit. So as someone who may use our information, may look at our ratings, I think it's important also to understand where there are some of those teams where you can look at and say, okay, well, maybe CFB Winning Edge, this is Coastal Carolina. Maybe they're a little low on them. Maybe I'm a true believer and think they're going to be a top 20 team again. So, as you go through and look at our ratings and rankings, kind of keep those sort of things in the back of your mind, if that makes sense.
All right. What are we moving to next?
Okay. In the middle of this team profile, you'll see position, unit, and ratings. And this is all the same information that was on that positions quick reference page. And there are two just the most important columns that I want to point out. On the right-hand side of this box, you'll see position strength. And sometimes I'll call it unit strength. Sometimes I'll call it position strength. I tried to make sure it was all the same everywhere in these sheets, but things have been kind of Frankenstein together over the last 3 or 4 years, and I might have missed some. But position strength and unit strength mean the same thing. That is basically the overall rating on the same type scale as our individual player ratings, but for that unit as a whole. So this is weighted by experience and career production, and it's weighted so that starters matter more than backups, and backups matter a little bit more than the depth players lower down on the depth chart. So when we say Alabama has our number 1 secondary, this is the number we're referring to. That weighted player rating average of 91.26 for the Alabama defensive backs is number 1 in FBS, number 1 in the SEC. If we say right now, they just lost Mac Jones, who is a 100 rated player. Bryce Young is super experienced, but he's only an 88.95 player rating right now. Backup Paul Tyson was a mid 3-star doesn't have very much playing experience, only played in one game. So he's under an 80 as a player rating. So right now, Alabama ranks 28th in our quarterback rankings. Now,
I mean, for an offensive line, to me, I mean, and I know we're not talking about specifics, but knowing the offensive linemen that they lost in the draft is just insane that they're still 4 at O-line. That's nuts to me.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point, because though these are weighted for experience and production, but the very first thing that we take into account in our player ratings and these unit ratings is recruiting ratings. And this time of year, the draft's just ended. You hear, oh, so-and-so was a 2-star or a walk-on and became a first-round pick. And yeah, that happens, but it happens at a much lower percentage than guys who are 5 stars, guys who are high 4 stars. So recruiting ratings are not perfect. Our numbers are not perfect by any stretch, but they are they do help us project a team's overall strength. So back on the left-hand side of this box, you'll see the 247 rating by position.
Oh, my bad.
So
yeah, over here.
So if I'm ever, on the podcast or in some things I might write or on Twitter or what have you, talk about a team's raw talent, I'm usually talking about 247 ratings. And we did have a patron who really, really wanted us to have rivals ratings as well, because he had done some research that showed that they were a little more useful to his own the work that he was doing on a mathematical scale. So we did include rivals ratings this year, but our individual player ratings are based on the 247 system, because it's a similar scale, just the decimal points in a different spot. But you can see how well Alabama has recruited. Well, that offensive line is the best group of raw talent among offensive linemen in the country. So even though we do weight by experience and production, they're not going to have, it's not going to fall very much, especially because it's such a big position group, more than a dozen guys on each team there. And that strength is really going to carry how well they've recruited that position. The quarterback position, we only take 3 guys into account. We only take the top 3 guys on the depth chart. And that's because, SEC teams might have 10 quarterbacks, 5 of which are walk-ons. And we didn't want to dilute it too much, but we also wanted to help, because the quarterback position is so important. If there's a group of 5 team, like Liberty, Malik Willis, right now considered one of the best quarterbacks in college football, has really helped elevate Liberty into a dangerous, group of 5 team, beat multiple Power 5 teams last year, beat Coastal Carolina in the bowl game. We wanted that player to be able to really raise his team's rating relatively quickly. So, if Malik Willis, for example, were a high 90s rated player, only putting 3 guys into that formula can help boost that number up a little bit more, a little quicker. So the 2 numbers here, and I think the other numbers are valuable. That's why we've included them here, but you can see how a player's rival rating is. VGR plus is just the average individual player rating at that unit, so not weighted for starters or players in the 2 deep. We did single out, the starters only. How do they rank among the FBS? The 2 deep, so the top 2 quarterbacks, top 2 or 3 running backs, top 6 receivers, how do those rank? But the 2 that I think are the most helpful to me personally are that position strength on the right, and then the 247 average rating on the left, because I can look at the raw talent available on that left-hand side, and then I can see, now how has that been affected by experience and production on the right-hand side? So if I just very quickly say, they're, our number 5, or for Alabama, our number 4 offensive line group, I'm talking position strength. But if I say they have, they're number 1 in raw talent, I'm talking about that 247 rating. So I'll try to go through the rest real quick. We're already 40 minutes in, but if you scroll down to the middle in that schedule area, we've got 3 different models that we use to project games week to week, every game throughout the entire season. And then we do grade ourselves against the spread. So against the Las Vegas point spread, I'll put out a post on Patreon each week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday, that has our official projections for the week. And then after the games, we grade those against the Vegas Insider consensus spread at the time it was posted on Patreon. So we try to do it the same time each week, same day each week, use the same source for those, for those lines so that we can grade ourselves. And we've had some success. We last year were 54% our official model against the spread. And then we've expanded to have a talent only model, which is so this official projection, the ones you're seeing here where it says projected spread, Alabama 13.34 against Miami. So we would say Alabama's a 13, almost a 2-touchdown favorite over Miami in that first game. We're talking about our team strength projections here. We use that very first number that we discussed where our overall power ranking, that's our official projection. That takes into account roster strength, coaching, and team performance. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see in that second schedule where it's got the same opponents, but it's got additional information. It says offense versus opponent defense. And then there's one below that. It says defense versus opponent offense. This is our talent edge. This is our what I will call Prism, our projected scoring margin model. This is where stats are the only thing. So only those team performance, only scoring offense, scoring defense, things like that. We're trying to strip out all of the recruiting information, all the roster information, and only look at stats. And this model was actually slightly better than our official model last year. It was the first time that we used it publicly, and it came in at over 54%. So we were really pleased with that and added it to our team profiles this year. But what we've done here is only looking at stats. We're trying to project the final score, because we had our even best success in 2021 was in totals, over and under. And so we've used our coaching team performance ratings and past stat history to project the amount of points a team will score based on the head coach and offensive coordinator's history, how much a team, how many points a team will give up based on head coach and defensive coordinator history. And then we try to project a final score. And it's a little bit misleading here because it says Alabama 33.7 and Miami 25.3, but the projected spread is Alabama. If you see on the third, and again, it's a little wonky, I know, but hopefully with some experience, it'll play out. And I do write these all up just in plain black and white each week. But on the third schedule, where it says talent edges, is where we actually combined the Prism spread as well. But that says that Alabama is projected 8.39. Those numbers don't necessarily add up, the 33.7 and the 25.3 for everything there. But what we're using, those numbers, we're not necessarily saying Alabama, the final score is going to be 34 to 25, but we think that the final score will have, 59 points. So that would be our projected total there. So we'll have to go maybe a little bit deeper on those once we get a little closer to the season. And I start releasing those weekly projections, final scores and things like that. Sometimes I have to, add a point here, add a point there, take one away here or there to get those numbers to add up. But we refer to that projected spread, that Prism spread, as our stats only model. So we would have Alabama favored by 8.4, basically, if stats were the only issue. And then left of that and the rest of this schedule portion is talent edge. So if talent were the only factor, and you see things like roster strength, 3-year recruiting strength, the 247 Sports for the full roster, the Rivals roster, all that stuff is thrown into a formula and spits out a projected point spread if talent were the only thing we're talking about. So no coaching.
Like this one versus Mercer here.
Yeah,
79.03.
Exactly. So yeah, if Nick Saban weren't on the sideline and knew that when his team was up 55-0, maybe he should pull back a little bit, we would expect Alabama to be able to beat Mercer by 79 points in week 2. So I will say in 2020, Talent Edge was our lowest performing projection. It was right around 50%. So we basically have overhauled it. So we have, I think, come up with a little bit better way of doing things by really focusing on certain aspects of recruiting history on that. So it's new and haven't. We've done a little bit of back testing, but we also try not to go too much on that because that can lead you astray as well. But so our talent edge is only talent, no coaching, none of that. So that is our three models there. We do include a little bit of past performance. The very bottom schedule here is 2020. The results, we have the average team strength that Alabama had last season against the average team strength for each opponent, the average roster strength on both sides, the projected scoring margin for both teams, so Prism there, that's referring to the 2020 season, and the team performance ratings from 2020 as well. We also have a post-game win expectancy, so those come from collegefootballdata.com. The box score, if you looked back at the box score of each matchup, what would we expect? How many times would each team have won that game based on those specific stats, and that gives us a percentage. You can add those up, and it shows how many games you would expect that team to win. And Alabama was expected to win 12.61 games last season, according to their post-game win expectancy, and of course they went 13-0. So there's a lot to digest there, and we'll probably have to break down that schedule portion a little bit more later in the off season. But just know that in here, that first number where it says projected spread is our official point spread projection, or it says projected points scored and projected points allowed. We use those to give our point totals and kind of a direction on what our final score projection will be. And then the talent edge is a projected point spread where only talent matters. And then the projected Prism spread is a projected point spread where only stats matter. So we're trying our best to give a range where, stats on the one hand, talent on the other, and then everything all together somewhere in the middle is our official projection. But we do like to track all three, and we especially pay attention when they all three are on one side of official Vegas spread, or we'll get more into that into the season. So okay, we're getting to the end, I promise. Down below, you'll see a thick black line, and then 2020 individual statistics and returning production. We've got all the 2020 players who recorded a passing statistic, rushing statistic, receiving, tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, and then miscellaneous. This comes from CFBstats.com. We've included that as well. But you see there's a lot of blue ink here. A little bit of green on the defensive stats, but those correspond to the colors from the depth chart portion as well. Blue means it's somebody who went to the NFL. Green is somebody who transferred out. You will occasionally see an orange highlight here for a player who had a medical retirement. But what this means is these are players who are no longer on the 2020 roster. We can go in, take their stats out, see what percentage is returning, what percentage is lost. And so we can see there that Alabama returns 5.4% of its passing attempts. You're there on tackles for loss, so we can see that Alabama has 74.69% of its tackles for loss returning. It lost 25.31% of its tackles for loss, the amount of yards there as well. Couple of new things. This is something we've done in years past, but this year we have also will be including, it will be finalized in May for the other 129 teams, but offensive line returning production, so starts and snaps for offensive linemen. And then also we're going to add total pressures for defensive players as well, because the QB hurries that are listed there in the miscellaneous section from CFB Stats, I think the PFF total pressures is a little bit better. So we're going to go through and add those and get a returning production number for that as well. All right. Sorry, I'm not leading you very well, Scott. Finally here at the very bottom is something that's brand new. And if you are watching this on May 8th, this is the only one that exists right now, but the other 120 will be added over the next 3, 4, maybe 6 weeks, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we've included our coaching staff and history page here. Patrons in years past, we had a different Google sheet for statistical projections, and that included this information with team performance ratings and points scored, points against, and then scoring margin for each head coach and offensive coordinator. And then we did a team history as well, because we blend in, even if it's a new head coach, you can't change everything overnight. So a team that scored 25 points a game last year isn't, we shouldn't expect them to score 40 points a game, even if their head coach is coming in, having scored 40 points a game in his last 3 years or what have you. So we kind of blend them all together, and it's, again, a lot of art mixed with science there. But this is where those projected scoring margin numbers come from. And like I said, that was our best model last year, and for most of the year was well above 55%. So we felt like it was a pretty good starting point. Feel pretty good about it. But we'll go through here and list the history of every head coach, their entire coaching history. So here you can see Nick Saban all the way down to his days as a GA at Kent State in 1973. And the reason we did that—
10 years before I was born.
Right. Me as well. But the reason we did that is, there are some coaching trees that can be informative. And, Nick Saban has been a head coach long enough that he is what he is, basically. So it's he doesn't necessarily matter, but you can see that he's got a history working for Bill Belichick. That obviously has influenced him in the past, working for guys like Jerry Glanville and Earl Bruce. Don James, of course, is a Hall of Famer coach that he played for and then coached under. So there are other guys, other coaches, maybe they're new head coaches that you might not be as familiar with, but you can look back and say, oh, well, he was a wide receivers coach under Mike Leach at Texas Tech. So he's got an air raid history. Even if a guy's a defensive, came up as a defensive assistant, and you can see sort of how they paired up with other head coaches, maybe under the air raid tree or a triple option tree or things like that. So you can kind of say, oh, well, their offensive team performance rating was this. Their defensive team performance rating maybe was a little higher or lower than I would expect, because they were in an option offense or an air raid offense or a pure spread or whatever. So it'll take a little, some prior, you'll have priors coming in of certain head coaches, but hopefully it'll just add a little bit of layer of information that you will be able to draw back or go off and research yourself and see, how you might interpret a new head coach or what have you, based on the other coaches that they've worked with. We've done the same for offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators as well. We've also included a program history dating back to 2005. This is, this section is not the prettiest, in my opinion. It's not laid out as perfectly as I would like it. It is the section I think that's crammed in here the most, but part of that is because our columns are set by the depth chart information up top. That looks a little better, but I think this information is important enough that we wanted to include it here. So we do have a program history. We do have the current coaching staff. This may change. I may find a way that, to present this a little bit better. But the information I think is most important. You can see here the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator history as well. So new offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien. We've got the scoring margin or the scoring offense that he had in the NFL with the Houston Texans. He was the play caller when he was the head coach at Penn State. So his team performance and offensive team performance ratings are included there. And then you can see in the, who has he worked with? Well, he's also worked with Bill Belichick. Prior to that, he was, in the George O'Leary coaching tree at Georgia Tech, and then broke off with Ralph Friedgen when he went to Maryland and Ted Roof when he went to Duke. So I just feel like that's some interesting information, and some coaches don't have a whole lot of team performance. Others do. Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator, you can see here, has several years more of defensive team performance and overall team performance history than Bill O'Brien does. But we did, even in the FCS and Division II days of his coaching career, we did go through and add points per game information, because we think, we might not incorporate it very much, may not weight it very much, but thought it was important to have that history as well. And then see, oh, okay, well, he's in the Ron Roberts tree. You know who else is in the Ron Roberts tree? Dave Aranda, previously LSU and now a head coach at Baylor. So I just thought that was kind of a good thing to add, FYI, just to
It's
to
pretty
know.
awesome. I mean, I've always wanted to put together like a huge coaching tree and everything, and this is this is exactly what it is. It's pretty awesome. I'm glad you added this. This is a really cool feature.
If you've made it this far in, and believe me, I'm A-okay with people taking my ideas and making them better, and that way I don't have to do it. If you can do it better than me, go for it. But here's what I think. I say it's $1 million idea. It's probably not, but something that everybody would appreciate. We need an IMDb for coaches.
Oh man. Yeah.
So somebody out there who's smarter than me, more, better web developer, what have you, I have no web developing skills. That's why we're in Google Sheets. But IMDb for coaches. That's what we need. Somebody out there, go do it. I would love it. That would be,
subscribe to that immediately, right?
Absolutely. So anyway, this will wrap it up for us for here. I think an hour is certainly.
I challenged you, Nick, and you made it. So
well, yeah, we said before we were going to try to keep it in 30-minute range. You said I don't think even you could stretch this out an hour. But
there's so much information on here, though. I'm really not that surprised when we actually physically got into it and started talking. And, honestly, I use this more for the depth chart than anything, but there's so much more information on here than just the depth chart. You know what I mean? So this is an incredible tool that you've put together, and it's amazing. And I'm glad I have access to it every single year. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. So we have added new information this year. We have snap counts. Had to go through as many team official pages, websites as possible, try to accumulate some stab counts. We filled in some blanks with PFF, who of course does great work. We've done the same with games played, games started. All of that information is currently up to date. Like I mentioned, we do update the depth charts as soon as possible when we get new information. So I agree with you. I think the depth charts are probably maybe our biggest value add. Ooh, excuse me. Take that out. Our depth charts are our biggest value add for folks who do DFS and CFF and things like that. But we do try to incorporate as much as we possibly can into our projections as well, because that's how we keep score. That's how we determine if we're doing a good job. This is a different approach, I think, than a lot of people have taken to go and drill down specifically to the player level, individual player ratings, just because it takes a lot of time. Not everybody has the time to be able to keep up with this sort of stuff. So we try to do that for people who are interested in that level, that depth of detail. But then we also, I have a coaching background, so I know that coaching factors are important. So I do think it's important to kind of single that out as we can. And then just, past history, of course, matters. So that's why we incorporate team performance as well. A team can play much better than its talent profile. A team can play worse than its talent profile. A team with a new head coach, even though they've got a new style of play, there's still a little bit of that past history that's going to come through as well. So we've just found that our projections get a little bit better when we incorporate coaching as well as team performance. But that roster piece is the biggest part. That's what we spend most of our time on.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up. Anything else we need to go over? Or did we get it all?
I think that's it. If anybody, a patron, of course, you can get in touch with us through Patreon. If you're interested in signing up, patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. Tier 2 patrons are who get access to these Google Sheets. But if you're, thinking of joining but still have questions, you can, of course, reach out to me on Twitter at CFB Winning Edge, through email, cfbwinningedge@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer some questions on the front end or if something is unclear. But if you've got suggestions, Patreon supporters, like I mentioned, have driven the creation of some new pages, the creation of information added, and we're always looking to get better, and we're always looking to provide as much value to our patrons as possible. They are who helps fund projects that we make. I'm able to hire some help to complete some of those projects. They're able to keep us going and fund some new research and things like that. So we absolutely very, very much appreciate that and want to show that appreciation as well as we can by providing as much value as, what information do you want? We can go find it. We can work on a way to create it and hopefully put it in one spot that will, help our supporters, use our information and the information that we can gather to serve whatever purpose it is that they're looking for.
All right. Well, remember, like Nick said, you can follow us on Twitter at CFB Winning Edge for Nick, at Bogman Sports for me. And if you guys have any questions, hit us up and we will see you guys later. Take it easy, everybody.